Welcome to the second video in a series of videos designed to help you share the gospel. In these videos, we're talking through different aspects of evangelism and how we might explain things to a non-Christian. The question for this video is, how do we know that God exists if I can't see Him or test for Him? We need to be able to argue this in a fairly simple way when we talk to someone about Jesus. Firstly, we need to note that Romans chapter 1 verses 19 to 20 tells us that what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For His invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. Paul is saying that all people know that God exists, and that the evidence for God's existence is the created world around us, the complexity of living things that we can see, and the fine-tuning of our universe. If it's so obvious, why do people argue against it? Well, Paul gives us two reasons. First, he says in verse 18 that they suppress the truth in unrighteousness. That is, they want their sin. They want to live autonomously from God, and so they reject the evidence. They deliberately suppress the evidence that God exists. And he goes on to say, a little further into the chapter, that although they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks to Him, but they became futile in their thinking. Paul is saying that in the process of rejecting the evidence for God, He allows them to kind of become foolish and futile in their thinking. And so their ability to reason on these things kind of gets broken. When we want to share the gospel with someone, we need to be able to reason that God exists in a very simple way. And just like it says in Romans chapter 1, we can point to the things that are made as the evidence of a creator. The easiest way to do this is to use an analogy. Point to something else that has been made. For instance, if I use my phone as evidence that there is a phone maker, I can point to this phone and say, well, I've got two options. Option 1, somebody made my phone. There's a phone maker. Option number 2, nobody made my phone. The metal, the glass, the plastic, whatever else is in that phone just fell into a pile, and that's why the phone exists. Ask them which one they think is true. They should hopefully say there was a phone maker. Ask them, have they met the phone maker? Do they know who the phone maker is? Anything about them? What country they're in? They won't. So ask them how they know the phone maker exists, and hopefully they should say, because the phone is there. The phone is evidence of a phone maker. And really, the other option, that it happened by accident, is absurd. It's just too complex to have happened by random chance and accident. We could do the same thing with a different item. For instance, my water bottle. It's not as complex as the phone, but even when we give them the choice between did someone make the water bottle or did it happen by accident, they should choose that there was a water bottle maker, because the other option, that it happened by accident, that's nonsense. It can't have happened. It's just too complex. Even as simple as it is, it's too complex to have happened by accident. The principle we can establish is that the more complex something is, the less sense it makes to say it happened by accident. And then we can point them at life. Life, even at the level of a bacteria, is very, very, very complex. If we look at a human being, well, we're much more complex. 3 billion characters in our DNA, trillions and trillions of cells organized as organs, those organs organized as systems, all those systems working together to make you and me. If complexity is evidence that there must have been a creator, then you and I are the perfect evidence that God must exist. Tell them to go home and look in a mirror, and they will see a being that is incredibly designed, very, very massively complex. Now, some people will object and say, but that happened by evolution, that's random chance. And yet you can say to them, well, who saw that happen? You've not seen human beings come into existence any more than you saw my phone come into existence, or the water bottle come into existence. And yet with those ones, you said, no, they were definitely designed. Why are you using the exact opposite logic when it comes to living things, when you've got no different amount of evidence for those? Now, they might make all sorts of objections that I can go and Google who made my phone, and yet they believe it despite the fact that they haven't Googled who made my phone. And they believe it anyway. The simple fact is that we tend to be biased against the evidence. Not because we have good evidence for how human beings came into existence, or anything living for that matter, but because we don't want God to exist. Because the moment that God exists, then He's in charge of our lives and not us. We like our autonomy, and so we reject the evidence for God. We suppress the truth in unrighteousness. We can show a person that they're actually biased against the evidence for God. It's not that there's no evidence. All living things are evidence of God's existence. It's that they don't want God to exist. What we ultimately need to wrestle with is the evidence sufficient? Well, yes, it is. And just because I don't like the evidence doesn't mean it's not true. I hope that helps you when you get to share the gospel with someone. Let me encourage you, please like and subscribe to our videos. And if you've got any more questions that you would like us to answer, please comment in the comment section of these videos, and we'll do our best to try and get to your questions. Thanks for watching. Go and share your faith.